and this is an empirical question, and it might be more true for this wave of post-October 7th stuff that's going on in the United States as distinct from what I saw in this country in the aftermath of George Floyd's death in 2020. And this is really what, I wouldn't say radicalized me, but certainly motivated me to take a different direction in my life in the business career that I was on. I was a CEO of a biotech company. Somehow there's an expectation that I make a statement on behalf of BLM, which I refused to do.
Oh, I remember that. Good for you.
It was a firestorm of controversy, and that took me on the journey that I've been in. But I remember looking at this very closely at the time. Who is actually showing up at these BLM protests across the country, the mostly peaceful protests that were somehow riots that were burning down cities? And I think that, push back on me if you see it differently, but I have some conviction of this. That was not in any sense of the word any majority or even significant plurality or even significant minority led by immigrants. These are self-hating people who have been in this country for generations, whether they're of black or white skin. The BLM riots in this country in the middle of COVID-infested America, COVID policy-infested America, really, in 2020, was really something that has very little to do with illegal migration or even legal migration, but something else of a national self-loathing that exists in this country. And even when I visited the south side of Chicago, and this is where I went to interface with people who don't agree with people like you and I, the kind of comments I got there were interesting, which was, these are people who are pushing me on my policies on racial reparations, which I'm dead set against in this country. Maybe there was a time for racial reparations in 1866 or in 1870, a time of Reconstruction, but not in the year 2024. That has no place in America. I'm dead set against affirmative action of every kind. And the thing I was told more than once, and not particularly in civil terms, was that this country was built on the back of my ancestors and not yours, which I think is really interesting. It's fascinating. That, I think, was a better representation of what was represented in the violent riots of the post-George Floyd death, BLM riots of 2020. And yet there's an element of that to me, feels familiar in at least a strain of what underlies your own vision of American identity, too, which is what I think is fascinating and just worth exploring. I don't think that BLM, you agree with me on the BLM piece, that
no.
Summer of 2020 was not immigrants. So you don't agree with me even on that?
Well, I would never have said it was particularly immigrants, but yeah. There were two different groups. First, you had the, and I think it would often go Antifa, i.e. mentally ill, white people, some immigrants. Actually, there were a fair number of immigrants, by the way. I don't know about the per capita.
You might be right about that. I just give you my impression.
They are definitely, the main distinguishing feature wasn't immigrants or non-immigrants. It was mentally ill. That's the Antifa group. And then you had, again, warning, hate fact coming. Then you would have just straight out black criminals. And I'm sorry, but for whatever reason, you and I think, would blame the Great Society program and paying women to have children out of wedlock. But African Americans commit per capita a disproportionate amount of crime. And then you'd see them coming through and doing the looting. And I'm not sure it would always go, Antifa smashes the windows, criminals or black criminals do the looting. But it was something like that most of the time. A fair number of the mentally ill ones, at least out in the Pacific Northwest, were definitely immigrants. Main distinguishing factor was mentally ill. And then what was the second thing you said? Oh, we built this country. No. The 1619 Projects, slavery was such a drag on this country. Thank God the North won the Civil War, which of course they were going to. It's like Israel versus Gaza right now. Not that I'm comparing Southerners to these bloodthirsty Hamas types, but the South was incredibly backwards, and it was backwards because of slavery, much in the same way cheap illegal alien labor or cheap foreign labor is holding America back now. Instead of using more AI, instead of farmers learning to use robotics, no, let's just farm the way we did in 1880. We have all this cheap labor. So they're bringing it in. They make money short term, but it's a disaster for the country long term. The South was so far backwards, so much behind the North. Of course, the North was going to win. The North was, literate, on the go, had factories, and slowly, we brought the South into it. But this idea that America couldn't have been built without slaves, no, it has been a black mark. Especially morally, on this country from the moment it began, and it began for the same reason. We're bringing in masses and masses of third world immigrants because the rich want cheap labor.
That's an interesting thesis. So you think that that's actually the real guiding force behind modern immigration policy?
For the Republicans and the Republican donors, oh, they love their cheap nannies and butlers and chefs. For the Democrats, and I really want to stress this, you are absolutely right. They just hate America. I mean, not all of them. Some Democrats are just idiots. But there's always been a portion in America, and there probably is in any country, of people who just hate America. I mean, there were communist spies working in the State Department, Vivek. Oppenheimer was a member of the Communist Party. That's why he had to have his security clearance taken away. Don't totally believe the movie, by the way. We've always had some segment of Americans who hate America. Why? I don't know. We'd have to, interview their shrinks. But they do, and they used to help foreign countries try to take down America. Well, now they can do it without leaving home. Now they can, and they make a lot of money doing it. These NGOs, this business about, we will volunteer. No, they're not, none of these groups, the Lutheran immigrant group, the Catholic immigrant group, the Jewish immigrant group, they are getting check after check from the government and paying themselves quite hefty fees.